Hey guys, I'm back. I'm Deja, and I wanted to share with you today the 3 times that God has opened the door for me to move. And hopefully my phone will not overheat because it's really hot. And last week, that's what happened. The first time that God has opened the door for me, this is even long before I was a Christian, but God was always there. I mentioned this story in my last video, but that was a separate video and I just threw that in there. It was part of the story, and I'm going to just repeat this story in this video real quick. This was about 16 years ago when I was living in New York. And when I was living in New York, I was dreaming of moving to California for 18 years. Ever since I was a little girl, I just wanted to leave New York. It was too cold for me. And I dreamed of moving to California just based on TV shows that I would watch. And they would always go to the beach and there were palm trees and I just dreamed of it. Well, one day that day finally came, and it happened through some tragedy, unfortunately, but the way God placed different things in my life and aligned all the events for me to do that was really unbelievable. To this day, I still can't believe the way I ended up in California. So at the time, I was married for several years and I had a full-time job in New York. And I would say those were the number 2 things that were keeping me in New York at that point. I was really running out of patience and I was really getting tired of being there. So at the time, my ex-husband was looking to transfer his job to an office in California. We even traveled to California to check it out. But it still felt like he wasn't really on board, like he was just doing it for me. At the same time, I had a full-time job, but I didn't really love it there anymore. I was kind of just done with that place. And so I didn't really know how we were gonna move. The year before that, we had a death in the family, which ended up moving my sister from another state where she was residing at the time. She ended up moving to California, and she had a newborn baby and she was pregnant with her second, and all I wanted was to be there with her, with the kids. I loved them so much. I just really wanted to be there, and in California no less. But I would have gone wherever she was, because at that point, as much as I wanted California, I really wanted to be near my niece and nephew. So fast forward 11 months after my sister had moved, July, I end up getting fired. It was definitely God firing me because everybody loved me at that job. They had no reason to fire me. The stuff they even said made no sense and it was a complete lie, and they knew it was a lie. So I really truly believe that God moved them to just get rid of me because I was just done with that place anyway. At this point, all I had left was my marriage, which was already falling apart for months. So a month after I got fired, I find out he met someone else he's been talking to, and there was no reconciliation. He didn't even try to fight for me. It was just he grabbed his stuff and left. It was just I found out about it and he's like, I'm out of here. It was very strange. So I was like, okay, I guess it's over. So I went through 2 weeks of depression, just laying in bed doing nothing, just crying myself to sleep every day. And so my sister calls me up and she's like, hey, why don't you just come live with me? You got nothing left holding you there. And I booked my one-way ticket to California. And that was how I ended up moving to California. I moved in with my sister. I stayed with her for I don't know, a year or so. Yeah, but I moved to California. I was so happy. I was near my family and my sister was there to take me in. Just everything that happened so quickly, The 2 things that were holding me back just fell away with no effort, no tugging, no nothing, just gone. Almost overnight. So fast forward, I got pregnant with my son. I was living in LA at the time. My sister was living 2 hours away. She had 3 kids by this point. After I had my son, I ended up quitting my job to take care of my son and raising him. And so I had no backup plan, no way to survive. I was not in a relationship with his father, so I was just on my own. And my mom was helping support me for that first year of my son's life that I was living in my apartment. And when my 1-year lease was coming up, my mom unfortunately said, I just can't afford to pay your rent anymore. I have my own rent. And she was also helping me with all my other bills, so I completely understood. And she said, I can't pay your apartment anymore. You need to figure out what to do. Sure enough, my sister calls me and says, come live with me. So I said, okay. So I put in my 30-day notice. I started packing. I reserved a moving truck, a storage, because I had a whole apartment full of stuff, and now I was going to be living in someone else's house. She was going to give me one room to share. The one thing I could say about all three of the events in this video is that I had peace about what was going to happen. Now, I will say that I don't know if this is important to the story, but I feel like it is. My sister and I, we always had a very, very rocky relationship, like since we were very little kids, okay? But yet, when I really needed somewhere to go, she was there for me. It's not only to give her the credit for that. I do believe God allowed her to be able to take me in. There were things that happened for me to be able to do that. I do believe God moves people, you know, and he places them where you need them the most. First of all, so why this is important is because the idea of living with my sister, someone that I have gone through a lot, we've gone through a lot together. And even the first time I lived with her, it ended in us fighting and me moving out. Okay, so that's gonna come back around again in the future because we just don't get along too much when we live together. And we can step on each other's toes. We are quite different. But yet, in this moment when I had nowhere else to go and she offered me a place to stay, I just had such a peace about it. And I think that's really important when you know that this is God moving you, okay? I ended up, you know, I packed everything up. I was ready to go. I moved in with her. I lived with her for about 3 years. Things were really great for the first year or so. And then, okay, so the phone overheated. So hopefully I'm able to continue where I left off. We lived together for 3 years. Things were great. And then things started to get challenging because I had to figure out how to make money. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff happening. I mean, it was 7 people in one household, so things were gonna get crazy. I started to get to the point where I just really wanted my own space. I am an introvert by nature, so I need my own space. I'm a very neat and clean person, and 7 people in one house, it was just very chaotic, it was just too much for me, and there was a lot of cleaning involved. So I was always cleaning after everyone, and I had no time to focus on work. My son's dad started to give me money to save up to get an apartment for my son and I. And he was sending me, like at the time he was living in a different city very far away. So he was just sending me links of different apartments in my area, and I just couldn't find anything that I thought I could afford or that I liked. Well, really just that I could afford and I liked at the same time. So I was looking at maybe roommates with someone else. I don't know. I didn't know what to do. So while I'm saving up money, my sister and I get into like an argument over something stupid as usual. And she basically tells me like, we can't live together anymore and I need to find my own place. One day my son's dad comes to town and he's like, let's go look at apartments. And he takes me to an apartment that he had already sent me the listing for, but I somehow overlooked, or I maybe thought like it's too much or whatever. So we end up going there, I believe on a Friday. They showed us like their blueprints and they gave us an application and they told us that they have a waiting list, which was fine with me because I wasn't really ready to like jump out and move out right away. I still needed to save up money. So we go home, we fill out the application. I was barely working at the time, so I wasn't really making a lot of money, so it was mostly going to be like him paying for the apartment. I remember going back on Saturday and to submit our application, but the office was closed. And so I remember it was drizzling outside, which is very rare for California. So my son and I was like, let's just go walk around and take a look at, you know, the apartment complex. And I remember walking through and looking at like, I was gravitated towards this one building in particular because they have a lot of different buildings where there was this giant tree, and I remember hearing a mockingbird. And mockingbirds are like one of my favorite birds. They're just very soothing when I hear them. And I remember when I heard it, it just felt so right. You know, I was like, let me imagine like living here. And I chose this little area that has a big grassy area with this tree, and there's an apartment right there. There's a few apartments in that area. And I was like, I want to live here so that I could sit and work on my computer and my son could play outside. And so we ended up leaving because they were closed. We came back on Monday, submitted our application, and then, you know, a week or two goes by. They had to do like a background check and all that stuff. And they let us know that we were approved, even though my son's dad was not planning on living with us because he lived in a different city at the time. We got the apartment and we were just waiting for an apartment to become available. So later on, we get a call. I get a call and they ask me to come in and they say, hey, we have 2 apartments coming up that are available. One is available like literally in like a few weeks and the other one in a few months. And they said, we cannot tell you which apartment it is because people still live there. And I said, well, which direction are these 2 apartments? And they pointed, one this way, one this way. And I said, well, which one is this way, which is that area that I liked? And they said, that one is coming up soon, like in a few weeks. And I was like, oh man, like I'm not ready. I wanted to wait till, a couple more months. But that area, just that whole direction is where I wanted that apartment. I still didn't know the exact apartment or even which, area was. But I just said, okay, I'll take that one because that's really where I want to live, by the fence. There was we have a fence in my backyard. I took it, and then, once that apartment became available, they called me and I came. Guys, I signed the lease before I even saw the apartment. I was so desperate to move out. Like, no shade at anyone. I was just so desperate to just be on my own. I didn't even go look at this apartment. At this point, I was already planning on literally living anywhere that I didn't even care. So here I'm getting an apartment. I really did not care the condition of this apartment or even where this apartment was. I just didn't care. So it didn't even occur to me to go ask to see the apartment before I signed the lease. I just didn't want anything to go wrong. I was like, let me sign these papers before I even, I didn't want to see the apartment and then find all these things wrong with it. And then in my mind, I'd be like, oh no, I can't live here. I have to start over. So yeah, for some reason, they made me sign the lease without even showing me the apartment, even though now at this point it was ready. So I signed the papers and then they're like, okay, let's go look at your apartment. So we go look at the apartment. It's the exact area that I wanted and the exact apartment that I wanted. Although I was willing to take any apartment in that area, but the one I was really wanting was the one that they walked us into. And I just remember laughing that I couldn't believe that at the time I thought I manifested it, but really just God opened this door for me, and an apartment that I overlooked somehow. My son's dad ended up sending it multiple times, and I guess, still wanted to show it to me, even though I didn't think we could get it. So we ended up getting that apartment, and that's the apartment that I've been in for 7 years now. It's the longest apartment I've ever lived in because I've always moved around a lot. But the fact was, the place where I was at, it was time for me to go. And then this other place somehow just appears out of nowhere, becomes available, we qualify, just all these things just fell into place, and the exact area that I wanted to live. And many times I hear those mockingbirds. Every time I hear them, I just love them, and it's just like the best feeling. Now, there were other times that God opened the door for me and somebody was already there waiting to take me in. And it wasn't always like the best scenario, but it was there. And it always led to something always came out of that opportunity, even if it was difficult to be there and live there at the time. Since we moved in 7 years ago, our apartment has doubled in rent. I know what it looks like when God says move. I know what it looks like. You now have no choice but to leave, and a place just magically becomes available to you. So as much as I've had people tell me, just get up and go, just find an apartment, just go do this, go do that, I've tried looking into these options and just nothing feels right. I mentioned in my last video that there were times that I was getting ready to leave this apartment. My business was doing really well, I was making really good money, and I really could afford not only renting a different apartment, I was getting ready to rent a house. And that all completely fell apart, and I had to start from zero. And when I started to go to church in 2021, and I was praying a lot about this because it's very difficult for me in this living situation, I prayed a lot. God showed me why I needed to stay and that it was not time for me to leave. So as hard as it is to sometimes be in a very difficult situation, you have to pray about it and you have to be obedient to what God wants you to do. And He's not going to let you leave if you're seeking His will and His obedience, and you're at the same time trying to do the opposite of what He's telling you to do. So He did not let me leave. I'm still there, but he's still showing me signs that I will eventually leave. Like I said in my last video, he did place a different state in my heart, and I know that eventually that door is going to open for me. And it's moving out of state is not easy. I've done it once, but that was much easier back then. I had no kids. Now I have a child. So there's a lot to consider when leaving the state. I'm just waiting for that door to open. But I wanted to share these stories with anyone that's in a situation where you feel stuck, because I've felt stuck. I've actually been calling it like quicksand, where you just can't even get out. Nothing you do is working, and it's just really difficult. I urge you to pray about it, and if you're not getting anything, definitely fast and turn off all social media and all entertainment, and just let God speak to you. Like, spend hours, if not days, as much as you can, and allow him to really show you why you're stuck, why he's not allowing you to move, because he will show you when it's time. Just please trust when it's time for you to move, and especially if you're constantly seeking his will, he will open that door. He will shake things up. It's not always a shaking, but in my situation, it took death, unfortunate death, and it took multiple fights with the person I was living with to literally like kick me out. And there was another story I didn't even mention, but there was another time I was not getting along, and I was like, nope, I'm out of here. We got into a big fight, and another place just magically opened up. So this has happened now to me like 4 times. Seek him and just hang in there, have patience, and focus on him as much as you can, because when it's time, he will open that door for you. And he will push you out of where you're living, as long as you're just following him. So I hope this helped anyone, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching.